So, welcome to episode 8 of Making Zach the Ripper. We are 27 days out from production now, so it's all counting down very, very quickly. So this week we thought we'd talk about compromises and rewriting. So inevitably, as the production has kind of gone on, we've had to look at some of the scenes, some of the locations, some of the dialogue, and look at rewriting, whether forced to because of challenges we faced, or whether we felt there was better ways of doing scenes. So this week we're going to talk about essentially that and the process of that and what that involves, and both of us having ideas about what could work, what could not work. So from that point of view, Warren, I just wanted to kind of get your sense of how you approach that as the writer when you come up to situations where you've got to rewrite a scene. Because I think one of the things before you answer that is that we both talked about is that all of this idea has come from your head. So it's not fixed in stone, but I think one of the things that it's easy to do as a writer, or indeed us as a producing partnership, is to think that what's been written on the page, because it's there, is that's what we've got to try and wedge ourselves or force ourselves into and make that work. When in fact, actually, often the idea gets better by having to have a challenge that you can't overcome to rewrite it. So yeah, just talk a little bit about kind of that approach, and then perhaps if you can give a couple of examples of where we've had to do that, and we'll go into a bit more detail about the production.
Yeah, it's one of those. You're exactly right. Is that because the script's been written largely 80%, 75, 80% for a long time. It's kind of in my head that that's what we're shooting, and down to literally the locations are in my head before we've got locations. I'm completely imagining Zach's house. I'm imagining Zoe's house. I'm imagining these things. And then, of course, the compromising starts because you have to find locations. So that immediately, and we were incredibly lucky with Zoe's house because that is largely how I imagined it. But literally every other location has been kind of, you have to sort of start again in my head with the script, because the script largely will work in most locations. But of course, because it's so in my head and what the characters are going to look like and sound like and feel like in a location, that was the first big one. So I think once those locations came in, there was quite a bit of rejigging of scenes. For instance, in Zoe's house, it was always written with a lounge and a kitchen, right? We go to this amazing location. There's an amazing dining room, another middle room, which of course gives us a lot more, we can move the characters around a bit. So immediately that throws up just the opportunity for some change, but it's never bad. It's always positive. I think it's always, and look, once you've got your locations and your cast, and you can start writing, rejigging dialogue a little bit in their like tone. Like Tiff's got a specific way of working. Sai very much has, but Sai's always been in my head. So Sai's been kind of in there from the start. But now we've got, for instance, Richard Herring has got a distinct set of, he's got a tone and a sort of rhythm to his voice. So that's quite exciting. So again, that's another reason for compromise and rewriting has been having a full cast, is that really does help. So so I think it's a constant source of compromise and a constant journey of compromise, but always trying to keep the final product to be as good as it can be, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And it's to kind of go on to a specific point around that. One of the areas that we had struggled with was, I won't sort of say where the scene occurs in the film, but there's a particular press conference scene that we've been trying to do. And originally it was a big room of press assembled for this press conference, and we're going to have cameras at the back, and we're going to have loads of media, and it was going to require a lot of supporting artists and a lot of additional equipment to kind of sell the believability of that press conference. And as time went on, we kind of, okay, well, that's a day shoot. That's going to be that. And then we sort of looked at it, didn't we? And sort of thought, do we have to do that to sell the ideas? Like, can we maintain the structural integrity of the story and what we're showing on screen without showing 40 journalists gathered for a press conference that we may turn around on a couple of times from our main characters who are hosting the press conference? And it was those type of things, which then, because we struggled with locations to find that scene, and we still haven't actually got that location, but it morphed when we realized actually the focus is the two actors doing the press conference. That's what we need to be on. With sound design and some trickery, we can create that without needing to create in real life. And then that led on to one of your great ideas where we were talking about how we could utilize those actors at that point, and we had a set time to kind of film what we were talking about. And then we talked about, oh, could we do this other idea, which I won't go into detail because, again, I don't want to spoil the film, but it's like, can we use them as well to capture this type of content in a different part of the film? And then that led you to rewriting that scene. And I believe you're still rewriting, aren't you?
I am, yes. Yeah.
So that's kind of one practical example.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting one, because it's kind of, again, going back to the writing process, is when you write a movie script, is of course you write everything exactly what you want. So if you want a car chase, you'll write a car chase. If you want a massive press conference with the great bundles of press and all the kind of trimmings, that's kind of, in my head, that was how the film, that scene would happen. But it's all, like I say, we've got a budget and we've got a situation where we are. And again, you sort of sometimes just sit back and think it's a police press conference. If you're watching two policemen talk on the telly, on the BBC News, for instance, it's not a full-scale production. It's a camera on a tripod pointing at the two policemen. So we just thought, well, we can sell this. And of course, it's Richard. It's Richard Herring and Esther. And, there's a real chance for them. It gives them a better chance to have some real fun with it, I think. If we just got a nice blocked-off shot of them doing their thing, and then, like I say, as you say, it freed up some space to do this other little bit we're gonna do. But a really good example is that in my head, it was always a press conference, but a big one. But then, of course, absolutely doesn't need to be. And people who listen to this will know that was the case. But no one would ever know. No one would ever know that was in our heads to do that as a bigger thing. And then, then it's just selling your ideas, really. I think with anything you do, be it a sort of mid-budget where we are, a big budget, or a tiny budget where I've worked before, it's always, you've got your script and your idea, and it's what's the percentage of that idea you can get from here onto the screen. And if you can get sort of 80 or 90, it's a massive success, because you're going to have to lose a little bit here and there because of money, basically. So, but no, I think generally we've done pretty well. There's been, the rewriting situation has been fairly minimal, I think. Not too bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I just, going back to that press conference scene, we talked about it, and then real world events were happening. And as you said about seeing how press conferences are presented in the media, because that's what we're going for, like a real live press conference scene. And then certain events happened in the real world, and there was these press conferences. And I remember taking screenshots, and you'd done the same. So we were sharing screenshots of like bad events in the world with press conferences. It's kind of weird, but it was great inspiration for that. Okay, yeah, that's what we're looking for. That's what we want, and enabled us to do that. And I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. We were talking about one the other day around a sequence that was going to involve, again, a lot of additional people, supporting artists who are going to have to be really physically active to sell a scene, a comedy moment. And then we were looking at it and thinking in terms, again, about time and money and coordination of getting all of those people and people who are happy. Because when you run on camera, you don't just run once, you run multiple times. We've got to make sure everyone's able, willing to do that. And it was just going to take a lot of time. And we thought, hold on.
That was kind of the main thing, really, is that, again, when you get closer and closer to a shoot, you're looking at your schedule, and you look at, that was like a quarter of a page of script, which was a gang of people chasing someone. You sort of think, that's easy, a morning. Easily, we're going to get there. We're going to get in at 8:30. Take an hour to get ready. The extras will all turn up. They'll all need managing. Then we'll have to go out and set it up. Hopefully the weather's okay, and then we have to run that angle, and you sort of think, I can see 1-2 o'clock ahead of me. Whereas then we sort of thought, what can we do? And we sort of think, do you know what? We don't even need that. We can sell that joke equally well with literally, a slow zoom in on a door. It's still as funny. It still makes complete sense, but it saves your whole morning, which when you're doing what we're doing and we're scheduling down to the second on, it's tight. You've got to think about this stuff. And it's a shame in some ways, but also it's a brilliant challenge because it's a comedy. You don't want to be cutting out lots of funny stuff in order to make time. So it's making something we can do in half an hour as funny as something that would have taken 5 hours and 20 extras.
So
so that's what we got to do.
Yeah, and I think when we were talking about, again, without going into specific details about the finale of the film and how we wanted to do that and the kind of scope of it originally, and then how we simply by budget restrictions, locations, etc., all of those things that come in, how could we still do that really effectively and create? Because ultimately, it's about what do we want the audience to feel when they're watching these scenes and these sequences, and how can we engender those feelings without having all these elements that we just don't have the budget for that we'd like to if we had, another £1 million or something. But and thinking creatively about that, and the storyboarding was definitely when we were thinking about that, is how we can shoot it where we still, and sound is so important, isn't it? You can create more atmosphere with
sound and music obviously are two enormous parts of it, and with a bit of music and some sound effects, you've done so much of the work required. But again, I love it. I love this part of it because it's always a challenge, but it's a creative challenge. It's kind of looking at a scene and thinking, how can we do that within our set of circumstances? And I think which you don't think of 6 months ago, because you don't. Why would you? But now everything starts to narrow in and hone into this figure and these days. We've got a certain amount of money. We've got 20 days. That's it. Can we waste half of one of those days shooting that scene? I don't think we can. And so that, I think, is it's a part of it that it's a challenging, but I do love it because it's challenging me to come up with ideas and you to come up with ideas to make this stuff work. It's great.
Yeah, it gives us a set of boundaries essentially to play in, isn't it? It was very, very clear. And as you said, the closer you get, the more real it becomes, and the more you have to find compromises, and you can't but I really want to keep that, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
I think if you're making an indie film around our budget, you're largely making a film about people talking in rooms. That's largely what a good indie film is people talking in rooms, because you haven't got the money for the big expansive explosions and car chases. So it's all about that. Then it's a performance piece. It's all about your characters and your actors making those conversations in rooms really really funny. Yeah. And and then peppering it with some, obviously we go out and about, we're out and about a little bit, and then just making it feel like a movie, really, which is your job.
Absolutely. On the flip side of finding the compromises and rewriting, what would you not be willing to compromise on? I know there's certain things are in my mind. It's like, no, we can't compromise on that. But I'd be interested to hear from your point of view, where does that stop? And you go, no, we need to make that work.
Oh, look, I mean, it's with a comedy, you get wedded to jokes, and that is dangerous, because sometimes that's the toughest part of particularly comedy writing, is that you get the edit, and your editor will be saying, and often it'll be the director if you're writing the script, and I'm directing this one as well, so I've got my hands on it, so I can kind of. But when it comes to the edit, the editor will sort of say, well, how does that scene move the film on? And I'll say, yeah, but it's funny. It doesn't move the film on, but it's funny, and that's where you can butt heads with. I say it'd be a director if I was just a writer on it, or it can be an editor down the line. But for this, it'll be jokes. I think it'll be stuff that I think's funny, but maybe it doesn't move the story on. It's difficult, really. That is a really an interesting one. That's why at this point with the script, I'm trying my best to make sure that each scene does move the story on, so we're not stuck in a situation where we've got to lose 20 minutes. And so if every scene matters and is punchy and pacey, then that should be limited. But yeah, for this it'll be jokes. That'll be the thing I'll be least willing to compromise on. But I'm sure I'll have to at times.
Yeah, no. So I think from my point of view, again, I've always kind of approached it with the sense of the script and the story's got to move things along exactly as you said, and every scene has to have a function. Watching other films that I watch and that really, really work, there's no fat on them. The script is there. It's really tight. It moves it along. Every scene has a purpose, and they get in at the last moment and get out at the quickest moment, and it's just tight. And I think that's what we're looking for with our script, and making those decisions. I mean, there might be a lovely shot that we spent a load of time composing. I'm thinking about the edit. It's like, oh, that's great. The light's lovely and it's lovely. But then if it doesn't work for the story, it doesn't work.
And when you start writing a script, sorry, Matt, when you start writing a script as well, inevitably every scene starts with Zach and Zoe enter the lounge and sit on the sofa, and ends with Zach and Zoe stand up and leave the lounge. And you never see that in films because that first draft of a script often includes people getting into rooms and leaving rooms. And so by this point, no, we're not having. There's none of that. You very rarely see someone enter a room because why would you? People don't want to see people walking about. Yeah. And but in the first draft, that's often something that needs sorting out quite quick.
Yeah, it's just trimming all of that sort of stuff, isn't it? And the other thing we talked about over the last week or so was about getting the script to the stage where we've got a locked shooting script ready to go. And we're very sort of close to that place now. And actors preparing, obviously everyone needs to know kind of what the final script is. It will change when you shoot it, but that's in collaboration and being creative with the actors on scene and on set with us as well. But in terms of going, right, that's our locked shooting script, I think we talked about it having it ready in the next couple of weeks. So the actors have got everything. Is that broadly where we're at? Is that where you think we're at this stage?
I'm hoping it'll be within the next couple of days. That's kind of my plan. Okay. I think we are. Look, it's a ever changing. I could continue writing this until the morning we shoot because you could just every time I go through it, I spot something. It's just a word or here or there or a little. Could that be funnier if that word was like that? And Si, our lead, is me and him are in sort of WhatsApp conversation every day, and he's going through the script now, and he's sort of saying, can I just drop a line in there? That'd be really funny if I reckon if I said that there. Of course, I'll burst out laughing and agree, and then and so that means another script change. But I think, and the other thing is we're planning to do some online Zoom rehearsals of scenes. Not the whole thing, but just some specific scenes that we think might need working on. And of course, as soon as you get the actors, particularly comics, which we've got some good sort of British comedy on board here, come up with ideas. When we did our rehearsal up in town, that threw up some lovely ideas, lots of laughter, and but it's at some point you do need a script that we're going to shoot, and I think everyone, the crew need it, the cast need it, everyone needs it, and then things can tweak here and there from now on in. But so next couple of days, he says with mindless optimism.
Well, no doubt we shall be talking about it more. But okay, brilliant. Well, look, I mean, I think that kind of almost brings us to the end of this episode, just talking about compromises and rewriting, and I'm sure as time will go on, there'll be more compromises as well. But that's just the nature of it. It's just to accept that as part of the process and not be beaten by it or defeated by it, because what you started with isn't. One last thing as well with comedy particularly is that what can happen is you'll hone a script over months with a joke, right, that you really like, or a punchline to a scene, or something funny happens with a scene. Because you're so bored of it by this point, every time I read it, it's gone. The comedy of it's gone now because I've wrote it and read it 1,000 times. So then if someone comes in at a rehearsal and does something even slightly different, it seems way better because you're bored of it. But sometimes you have to have the confidence to say, no, that was always been funny. So the temptation is, because someone said something new, that's going to be funnier. But I think it's my job. Again, something I'm not great at. I need to be really, that's the script. We've always been, people like the script. It's worked well. So be confident in it rather than, again, because you can imagine when you've got that much comedy on set, it can get away from you. Because they've all got ideas popping around, which is an amazing atmosphere to work in. But it does sometimes need, me and a script supervisor to say, no. Yeah. Well, it's making sure we get those takes with the script. There you go. Let them play. And then have time to just do other stuff. Yes, good shout. Fantastic. All right, cool. Well, listen, that brings us to the end of this episode. ZachTheRipper.movie.com for newsletter subscription. Like and share if you can with the social media. And we'll be back for episode 9, where we're going to be talking about some other topics around the film. So, yeah. That's that. Thanks, Oz. As always, I'll speak to you soon.